Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're here to talk about Nicole Kidman and A24's new movie Babygirl. Now this has been out for a while in America, but Australia just got it and I just saw it and I really enjoyed it, so I really want to talk to you about it. Now spoiler free very quickly, and then a full spoiler discussion about themes, characters, what I made of certain interactions, what I made of all the spicy, interesting commentary and scenes. Let's just get right into it. So spoiler-free thoughts. This film looks incredible. I think this is an underrated part of the film itself. It has that A24 look. Honestly, it actually reminds me of the way Succession and Industry were shot. It's got a very corporate, frantic, sometimes almost mockumentary feel to it, and it makes these scenes of intimacy, these erotic scenes, feel really invasive and almost like, oh, we shouldn't be seeing what we're seeing. I really appreciate how this film was shot. It almost reminded me of the way Luca Guadagnino, the director of Challenges and Queer, shoots sensuality, but far more chaotic and far less refined, but this lack of refinement feels intentional. Now, nerdy stuff out of the way, I thought the music was incredible, but more importantly, I really appreciated the way the characters were drawn in this film. So Nicole Kidman's husband and her lover, played by Harris Dickinson Samuel, they're all characters who feel like they are unsure of why they do, what they want in the bedroom and out of life. And I think this movie is very much intentionally trying to get at that. It's trying to explore this idea of, if you don't know what you want sexually, if you are afraid to confront that properly, how can you expect to handle anything else in your life? You know, what does that say about you and the way you navigate the world if something so kind of built into our nature is something that is so confronting and taboo and scary to talk about? And this movie feels like it's trying to kind of shatter that. I appreciate that the director, who also did Bodies, 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 has talked about a lot of these experiences she went through. And when you watch the film, I feel like it's rather bold and brave to admit that, not because I think she needs to be shamed for any of this, but rather I think general audiences are going to find this movie rather confronting, but then those who are in the know, those who already engage in this sort of stuff and are more comfortable with sexuality in general being explored in film and in greater society, will have a really good time with this movie. And I think the importance this movie places on sexuality is incredibly fascinating and actually feels like kind of important. And I think that's what I was impressed at most with this movie. You know, a few of my friends going into it made jokes that this was the Nicole Kidman orgasm movie due to articles like this being released. And on top of that, going into it, there were a lot of comparisons to 50 Shades of Grey, but gender swapped. And this movie is not that at all. Truthfully, the steamy scenes themselves are very few and far between. If anything, a lot of it is actual foreplay and power dynamic play. The actual scenes of them, you know, clapping cheeks are very few and far between. I can only really remember one. And I feel like people have been going into this movie expecting like ACOTAR, but for like the business environment, or like Succession, but mixed with pornography. And instead they're getting this really kind of deep, introspective film about what happens when someone hasn't prioritized their sexuality and what they want in the bedroom and the big knock-on effects that can have. And I do think this movie brings up really confronting ideas. I was having fun in the car ride home, imagining what it was like for all the other couples in that car ride, right? Like for me, I just go in the car, I'm like, all right, we've got some stuff to do when we get home. But I feel like for a lot of other couples there, this would have been a really confronting movie. There's a revelation about her and her husband's sex life that I feel like if you don't have that shit on lock, you're probably in for a really awkward car ride home. But regardless, I do think this movie, really explores some stuff in a really interesting way. And the big thing I want people to go into this movie kind of looking for, before I get into the spoiler-filled section, is this idea that these characters are unsure of why they do what they do, and they're searching for it. Even Samuel, right, the guy that's meant to be part of this love triangle, who's like the dominant kind of like imposing, like, do this, good girl, blah, blah, blah. He seems unsure of how to actually navigate that. He's not this dominant daddy coming into the movie. He is also learning. And the fact that he's younger and figuring this stuff out with Nicole Kidman is actually an important part of the plot. It is not this 50 Shades of Grey in reverse dynamic where he has all this stuff figured out and she needs to figure it out, or vice versa. They are both stumbling through trying to kind of like figure out why they like what they like and what they like. Now, click off the video if you haven't seen the movie and go see the movie. I think it's pretty good. 8 out of 10. Now, let's get into the spoiler-filled section. Now, a few things got me excited going into this movie. I heard it was an affair movie. And gonna be real, I like the juice of a good affair. And I think the big thing here is, though, it's an affair, it's in a love triangle where I have empathy for every single party involved. Now, if I told you this story without you seeing the film, you would probably be like, oh, well, obviously, you know, she's the worst. She's having an affair on her awesome husband who hasn't done anything wrong. How the fuck could she do this? How am I meant to root for her to have a sexual awakening with this younger guy? That feels like an abuse of power, yada, 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 yada. And this movie kind of addresses all this stuff, but also makes it important from the jump. Like, it makes sure you know that this movie isn't really trying to go down that route. It is trying to strictly be about a character study about Nicole Kidman and kind of why she is the way she is, what makes her tick sexually and non-sexually. And yeah, so as a result, you're not going to get some massive cathartic moment where Nicole Kidman's husband, played by Antonio Banderas, really gets his true moment to shine. I mean, he does freak out for a minute, but if anything, the way it's framed, he comes off a bit douchey. And like, look, like he had every right to say what he was saying, but I think what this movie does so well is basically there's this moment where Antonio Banderas finds out about this affair, finds about this kinky thing that Nicole Kidman and Samuel have been doing. And he goes, what? Because you've never done these kinks before? Because you've never come that way? Yada, yada, yada. You think this is okay to break up a family? And like, obviously, if you haven't seen the movie right now, you hear that and you go, fucking right on. But in the context of the movie, after you've seen her struggle with what she wants to do in the bedroom, struggle to admit to her husband what she wants in the bedroom because she's so embarrassed, and then also watching him kind of miss a bunch of like cues to kind of step up sexually. This moment, rather than being angry at Nicole Kidman or Antonio Banderas, you just feel like shame. You feel like there's this awful tension between the two of them of like, oh my God, her sexuality is now this like problem. And I know that maybe when you're hearing this, when you haven't seen the movie, I just sound immoral and stupid, but watch the movie because it does work. Nicole Kidman carries this secret of what she's into in the bedroom and how she hasn't finished or climaxed with Antonio Banderas before. And these secrets feel the equivalent of being like massively in debt or being a victim of like assault or abuse. Like, it's this big secret for her. And I really like how they build this throughout the movie. There are these sections where she goes to initiate kind of like some kink into the bedroom with Antonio Banderas, notably a scene where she wants to watch pornography while in bed. And then she's so nervous to even ask that she has the sheets over her face. She's like scared to even admit it to him, and he unfortunately misses the mark and doesn't actually do it with her. He gets freaked out by the pillow and the obstruction of the face and kind of laughs her off. And to be honest, in that situation, I was like, I would almost get where Antonio Banderas is coming from if she came onto him and out of the blue presented these ideas. But it did feel slightly selfish because he rolled her over. He woke her up and was like, yo, let's smash. And then when she's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, can we try this and this? He's like, I don't know. And at the end of the day, that's not crime of the week. That doesn't mean she should go have an affair. But when she does meet someone who's younger who wants to try all these things with her and like figure out her sexuality with her, you kind of get it, you know? And it's almost this thing of like the way her sexuality is framed is like she can't even begin to talk about it with Antonio Banderas' character, with her husband. And I think the way they pull this off is like perfectly executed. I completely bought into it. I was completely rooting for her, even at times when I was like, oh, I don't know. It was really well done. Like, you're kind of rooting for this affair to work out, and then the movie constantly brings you back down to earth, like Nicole Kidman's character. And I like that this whole movie is essentially like, life short, have an affair. It feels like they've kind of taken the Ashley Madison mantra, but kind of made it earnest and heartfelt and made us understand how couples get to this point and how to get out of it also. She learns things with Samuel that she's never done with Antonio Banderas before. And like, we're going to get into nitty gritty details. She has a type of climax that she hasn't had before, seemingly, right? Because she's having sensations that she's not familiar with. And he seems to know what's up. So he's clearly like a new age man, right? He's been Googling WikiHow, how to do this, how to do that, how to give a girl her first, yada, 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 right? So Samuel is on it. Just quickly, some stuff I forgot to mention. It is very much implied that because Nicole Kidman focused on her career so much, focused on what she was doing, becoming this high power CEO, she kind of neglected a lot of things in her personal life. And you can safely kind of infer that one of these was her, like, what she was into sexually, her sex life in general. Like, it was never a priority. And now it's this late in her life. It's like a very confronting thing to explore. Also, there's this great quote later in the movie when Antonio Banderas says, oh, the things you're into, they're just a male fantasy. And it's this like warped feminist idea of like, by you doing it, it's empowering, but you don't really want this. You just want it because men want it, right? Like this whole like dominant in control thing that men do. And then Harris Dickinson's Samuel actually claps back and says, that's actually a really outdated way of thinking, in a very comical moment, but like it's true, right? It's different generations of men and the way they look at this stuff. Samuel, which I will mention later, is clearly a guy that's been Googling how to do all this stuff and how to be a good lover, because like he's in a new generation where like TikTok's gonna blast you if you're not looking into that stuff, and rightfully so. Whereas Antonio Banderas, his head's spinning, he can't even comprehend it. Also, yes, I've mentioned Googling a few times, but also the importance of just talking to your partner directly without adding a sense of shame of what they're into and what you both want to do, and make it like a cool, fun experience rather than a really judgy, fucking weird one. This peaks in a moment where the way she climaxes is guttural and loud and not for the boys. You know, this isn't a climax like at the start of the movie where she's faking it that feels like it's taken straight from a Korn movie. This is, you know, like a true climax. And Nicole Kidman cries afterwards. She's confronted by what comes out of her. She's confronted by the sensations she was having. And this is a really emotionally devastating moment. This isn't funny. This isn't even particularly like hot. It's just kind of like you're witnessing this insane moment. And I think the movie really captures how that would feel. And I was, again, laughing on the way home. I was like, I don't know how you could possibly do a male equivalent of this scene without feeling crude and ridiculous. Like, I guess the equivalent would be in bed, a guy discovers his prostate and, you know, then has tears in his eyes. But again, like, even just saying that sounds a bit funnier. But this movie pulls this moment off with a lot of grace. And it feels, really quite powerful. And scenes like this make you understand what is in it for Nicole Kidman's character. And, you know, then afterwards, she's crying in bed. In one of the greatest moments, she's crying in bed. And Antonio Banderas goes to initiate again. And this is after the last time where he initiated and then didn't do what she wanted to do. So he initiates again and starts being like, oh, baby, let's fuck. And then she rolls over. He doesn't even realize the tears on her pillow, but we do. Again, I love the way this movie frames these things. We feel like we're getting a peek into something we shouldn't be seeing. But she rolls over and just cracks it. And she's like, I've never finished with you. And this is after she's climaxed in a new, totally insane way with Harris Dickinson's character, Samuel, the guy she's having an affair with. And I love that from that point on, she gets really attached with Samuel. Samuel is also very attached with her. He gets really clingy and attached to her and wants it to be kind of more of a relationship, even though he says it doesn't. Like, there's clearly something, he can't figure out how he feels about the affair. And then after this, she gets really clingy. There's this scene where she kind of loses it about Samuel and smashes something, being like, you can't do that, you can't have another partner. All really, really interesting stuff. Now, Nicole Kidman's character, like, isn't perfect. One thing I notably kind of noticed is that she's consistently always on her phone in settings where she shouldn't be. Yes, obviously she's a very successful businesswoman and she needs to answer her phone, but there are a lot of times where the way she interacts with her phone feels like a moody teenager that doesn't want to talk. And I guess that is kind of demonstrating how she feels about Antonio Banderas. You know, if he's not interested in kind of exploring these things sexually with me and validating what I want to do, why am I interested in this benign conversation? Also, you know, the way she shows up to the theater, and he makes a comment about the fact that this is the first time in 20 years since they started dating that she's shown up at the theater, and it feels like she's only shown up at the theater out of guilt for cheating on her husband. So all of this character stuff is really well done. It peaks in this moment where, as I mentioned before, Antonio Banderas is confronting Nicole Kidman about the affair, and she tries to understand and justify it in real time. And it feels like ad-libbing. It feels like when you've done something and you know there's a reason for it, but you can't really explain why. It feels, again, very childish. It feels very stunted. She suggests that there's something in her childhood with her parents, maybe, or something else that happened to her, maybe a certain type of essay. I'm not exactly sure, because she's not exactly sure. She's really struggling to get the words out and talk to him about it. And at the end of the day, like, how could you do that when none of the excuses you give or none of the reasoning you give are even going to be good enough for this guy who's clearly very heightened in his emotions? But I thought the way this scene was delivered, the uncertainty of trying to explain why she wants, why this happened, what was in it for her, et cetera, is so well done. And similarly, Antonio Banderas is also really struggling to verbalize why he's mad at certain points. Just really well done scene. And again, Samuel is a really interesting character as well in terms of what he wanted out of all of this. I genuinely feel like he just wanted to kind of learn and understand women. I think he's quite young. He clearly has experience. I think he sort of wanted to have this kind of no strings attached relationship, but also just something that he can dip in and out of and then apply to younger girls, almost to feel like he has an advantage with women in his real life. Do you get what I mean? Like, I understand this older woman. I've learned some things. I know some stuff, and I'm going to apply it throughout the rest of my life. And I think Nicole Kidman obviously had this massive awakening, and then the movie ends with her and Antonio Banderas trying the way she climaxed earlier in the movie with Harris Dickinson. And very, very tastefully, there's this montage of her imagining Samuel taming the dog. And at first I was like, oh, is she just picturing Samuel while he's like finger blasting her? Like, let's just be real. And then I was like, oh, it's not doing that. I think what it's doing is it's basically suggesting that the way Harris Dickinson is taming this dog, the way Samuel is taming this dog, is basically the way he's kind of tamed and allowed her to see her sexuality. It felt like the way they were cutting in between at the moment he gets the dog to sit or do what he wants, I forget exactly what it was, is the moment she finishes. And it's almost suggesting Samuel has been able to enter her life, be this kind of like catalyst for her reclaiming her sexuality, and then exits her life. He's in Japan or something now. And I felt like the moment, where he's taming the dog is her getting in control of her own sexuality, wearing the pants in this dynamic and being like, here's what I want you to do, and we're going to do it, and you're going to respect these things I want. And Antonio Banderas, if anything, actually got the kick up the butt he needed and the warning he needed from this affair. I thought it was just really well done. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, man, I need to start thinking about how I bring these dynamics in. Like, I appreciate that we're back in an era of actually hot cinema like this, and Challenges and Sanctuary. Like, I appreciate that we're getting movies that are actually talking about sexuality in an adult way. And like, the audience I saw it in was a bunch of couples, and no one was really laughing. People would take it seriously. And I think, again, the way this movie presents the climax scene, these emotional scenes, these sex scenes, all feels very serious and very well earned. And I think a lot of criticism I've heard of this movie seems to be from people that just wanted it to be, kind of flipped 50 Shades of Grey, which I think is really disappointing. I also love the introduction of Samuel's girlfriend at a certain point. I think it brings a really interesting dynamic. Obviously freaks Nicole Kidman out, but I also think it's very telling. There's this moment where Nicole Kidman wants to break them up. So she says, he's an intern, you're in a position of power, you really shouldn't be doing this, which... who the fuck is Nicole Kidman to be talking when she's in a massive position of power? But again, I don't think the movie is judging Nicole Kidman. I don't think anyone in the audience cares. I don't think anyone in the actual in-universe movie cares about this abuse of power. Like, I don't think anyone's actually mad that Nicole Kidman's sleeping with Harris Dickinson. But I think it's really slimy of Nicole Kidman to kind of use this as leverage to try break up Samuel and his girlfriend. Very pot calling the kettle black, obviously, but says a lot about her character. And again, I really appreciate that they suggested that her sexuality was kind of stunted and childish. Again, putting the pillow over and putting the sheet over, being scared to tell him things and being like, you need to look away, I need to put the sheet on before I can admit this. The way she sneaks off to porn, all of it feels very, very teenage, but you can't really blame her given the position she's in and given how much of an adult she has to be in every other department of her life. I think the way it's kind of showing that in some respects she is quite kind of juvenile and childish and needs to grow up or needs to have someone in her life that can help her be an adult about these things is really interesting, because when it comes to Samuel, this childlike nature of Nicole Kidman comes out. She, has these very heightened emotional reactions when she finds out that he has a girlfriend. She kind of lashes out at Antonio Banderas. She feels like a 14-year-old that's in love for the first time, and good dick will do that. Like, straight up, and I mean this both ways. Like, if you have genuinely euphoric sexual experiences, like guy with a girl, guy with a guy, girl with a girl, girl with a guy, if you have someone who like gets it sexually and wants to figure it out with you and makes that a priority after a string of people that don't do that, you have a tough time stop thinking about them. Like, it does change things in your life, and I think this movie captures that perfectly. Watching this high power corporate CEO, basically boss bitch, become undone just because she got a real good blasting from behind is really fascinating. And as crudely as I put that for humor's sake just now, the movie itself takes it incredibly seriously, and a lot of these scenes are devastating and confronting and really interesting. So I hope you enjoyed my quick interpretation of Babygirl. If I had to give a more in-depth, really good spoiler discussion and like deep dive into every single scene, I'll need to wait till it's on digital and really watch it scene by scene and do like an hour-long video. But I hope this provides some extra substance for those of you who have seen the movie, and I hope for those of you who haven't seen this movie, this made for like an interesting discussion at the very least. Thank you so much for watching. Now, just quickly, I do offer memberships for this channel. For the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to me talking about every single movie and TV show I watched last year, ranked, hours of content. You also get a monthly or fortnightly, depending on how much I watch, podcast where I cover everything I've watched in a certain month, both TV shows and movies. Members also get to vote on members-only videos. So please let me know what you'd like me to talk about next for this channel and for members videos if you become a member. Thank you so much for watching. Links will be in the description. Have a lovely day.